Millionaire CEO came to buy engagement cake and saw his ex behind the counter holding little girl. Hi, my beautiful family, heavenly God. Tonight I lift every woman in this family into your endless light. Bless them with a peace that sinks deep into their bones, a strength that rises even when the world tries to break them, and a love so powerful it warms every soul around them. These women, my readers, my sisters, my family, carry homes on their shoulders, wipe tears no one sees, and still give kindness without limits. Honor them, protect them, and let every Christmas blessing fall gently upon their hearts. Lord, let joy fill their homes, let warmth surround their children, and let comfort replace every silent pain they never speak of. May their dreams rise again, may their spirits never feel small, and may their days ahead be brighter than every struggle they survived. They deserve heavens of respect, oceans of tenderness, and miracles wrapped in your grace. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, I am with Mr. Peter. Noah Henry had buried her. That single thought looped through his mind as he stood frozen in the doorway of Sweet Rise's bakery, phone slipping from his fingers, the screen cracking against tile he didn't hear. Vanetta Flowers, the woman he'd mourned for 4 years, the woman whose empty casket he'd watched lowered into frozen January ground while snow fell like tears from a grey sky, the woman whose death had carved him hollow and left him walking through life like a ghost himself, was laughing. Actually laughing, head thrown back at something a customer said, flour dusting her dark brown skin like powdered sugar, hands moving with confident grace that spoke of years of practice, alive and radiant and impossible and devastatingly real. Their eyes met across the display cases filled with perfect cakes for perfect celebrations he'd never have. Noah's lungs forgot how to work. Every molecule of air in Miami suddenly vanished. The world tilted sideways on an axis that made no sense. His vision tunneled until all he could see was her face, her smile, her eyes that weren't showing even a flicker of recognition. Vanetta's smile didn't fade, didn't show surprise, didn't reveal anything except polite professional interest in a potential customer. She looked at him the way you'd look at a stranger asking for directions, polite and distant and already moving on to more important things. She turned back to her customer without missing a beat, voice warm as honey with razors hidden underneath every word. That'll be $23.50, sweetheart. Would you like me to write anything special on top? A name, maybe? A message for the birthday girl? Noah stumbled forward on legs that barely remembered how to function properly, gripping the glass counter like it was the only solid thing in a world that had started liquefying around him. His mouth shaped her name, tried desperately to form the syllables that had haunted him for 4 years straight, but no sound emerged from his throat. His vocal cords had seized completely. She was right there, mere feet away, counting change with elegant fingers he'd memorized every line of, deliberate and unhurried, moving through her day like he wasn't actively dying 3 feet away from her. Vanetta. The word finally scraped out of him, raw and broken and desperate enough to make nearby customers glance over with concern. She looked up slowly, almost lazily, and her voice was pleasant, professional, absolutely devastating in its complete neutrality. I'm sorry, do we know each other from somewhere? Before Noah could answer, before his brain could even begin to process the absolute impossibility of that question, before he could form words that might make any kind of sense of this moment, a little girl exploded from the back room with the kind of chaotic energy only small children possess. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old, carrying a wooden spoon like a sword she was about to go into battle with, chocolate smeared across her round cheek, and she had his eyes, his exact eyes, the same unusual shade of grey-green that his grandmother had possessed, the same eyes that stared back at him from mirrors every morning, eyes that couldn't possibly be coincidence or genetic chance. Mama, I made the frosting pink, all by myself. Look how pink it is. Vanetta scooped her up in one fluid motion that spoke of years of practice, never breaking eye contact with Noah for even a second, the gesture possessive and protective, and absolutely final. She settled the little girl on her hip with the ease of someone who'd done this particular movement 1,000 times. Someone who'd built an entire life he knew absolutely nothing about. "That's my genius, Layla. My smart, talented girl. Say hi to the customer, baby." The little girl waved enthusiastically with sticky fingers. Chocolate smeared not just on her cheek, but somehow in her hair, grinning with the unself-conscious joy of children who still believed the world was fundamentally good and people were fundamentally kind. Noah's vision blurred with tears he couldn't let fall. His knees threatened complete rebellion against holding him upright. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered, breaking the moment, and Vanetta handed her daughter to an employee with gentle instructions about washing hands properly. "I'll be right back, sweetheart. Go clean up with Miss Rita. Make sure you get all that chocolate off before you eat anything else." She walked toward Noah with measured, deliberate steps, close enough that he could smell her perfume. The same one. The exact same scent he still kept in a drawer at home because throwing it away had felt like murdering her twice, like accepting her death all over again every time he looked at the empty space where it should have been. Her whisper was intimate as a knife slipping between ribs, cutting deep and precise. "You have 60 seconds to order a cake or leave my bakery immediately. Choose fast, Mr. Henry." Noah's voice cracked like broken glass, like every word was cutting his throat on the way out. "You're dead. They said you were dead. I went to your funeral in Connecticut. There were 200 people there, your family. They cried real tears over your casket. Your mother gave a eulogy that broke my heart. I stood in front of everyone and talked about you in past tense, about the future we'd never have together. I buried you. I mourned you for years. I stopped living because you died. I was dead," Vanetta interrupted, her eyes bottomless black holes that had seen things that aged you past your years, past your capacity for softness, past your ability to trust anything good that came into your life. "You made absolutely sure of that, didn't you?" She walked away without another word, returning to her waiting customer like Noah was already forgotten, already erased from her present, already less than nothing to her. She smiled brightly and chatted about birthday parties and anniversary celebrations and graduation cakes, existing in a world where Noah was completely invisible, where 4 years of his grief meant nothing, where she'd built an entire thriving life without him and didn't need his presence contaminating it. He stood paralyzed in the middle of a bakery that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon and fresh-baked lies, drowning on completely dry land. His hands shook uncontrollably at his sides, his throat closed around words he couldn't form even if his life depended on it. His entire world tilted on an axis that no longer made any sense whatsoever. Everything he'd believed about the last 4 years, everything he'd accepted as unshakable truth, every tear he'd cried, and every sleepless night he'd endured staring at ceilings, wondering what he could have done differently, all of it was based on a lie, a complete fabrication. Layla watched him from across the room where Rita was patiently wiping chocolate from her small hands, tilting her head to the side exactly the way he did when confused about something, exactly the way his mother had always said made him look like a curious puppy trying to understand human speech, and something in Noah's chest cracked open completely. It bled 4 years of accumulated grief onto checkered floors that had probably seen 1,000 other people's dramas, but never one like this, never someone confronting a ghost who'd deliberately chosen to stay dead, who'd built a new life from scratch and wanted no part of their old one. Never someone facing the woman they'd mourned coming back to life and pretending not to know them at all. Vanetta served her customer with practiced efficiency that spoke of years of experience, laughing at jokes and making small talk about the weather and how Miami was so much hotter than usual this year, smiling and chatting about wedding cakes and graduation parties and baby showers. She moved through her space with confident grace, existing in a world where Noah was completely invisible, where his presence meant absolutely nothing to her daily operations, where she'd learned to function perfectly well without him or his money or his name. Other customers filtered in steadily as the morning progressed into the breakfast rush, the bell above the door chiming regularly with each new arrival. Life continued its relentless march forward around him, while his had stopped completely, while everything he'd believed shattered into pieces too small to ever reassemble into something that made coherent sense. He stood there for 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours in hell, then 20, then 30. His phone rang twice from where it had fallen and cracked on the floor. Text messages piled up steadily. Probably from his assistant Emily asking about the engagement cake he was supposed to be ordering for his upcoming wedding to Gabrielle. Probably from Gabrielle herself asking sweetly if he'd remembered to handle this one simple task she'd delegated to him. The world outside kept spinning relentlessly, kept demanding his attention and participation, kept pretending that reality hadn't just shattered into fragments he'd never be able to piece back together into anything resembling his previous life. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 45 minutes of standing there like a broken statue, Vanetta called over her shoulder without even bothering to look at him directly, her voice carrying across display cases, filled with perfect cakes for perfect people, with perfect lives that would never include him again. "We close in 10 minutes, sir. I'd hate to have to call someone to escort you out of my establishment. I'm sure you understand." The words were perfectly polite on the surface, the kind of thing you'd say to any lingering customer who'd overstayed their welcome. The threat underneath was pure steel wrapped in velvet and delivered with surgical precision. Noah's legs finally remembered how to move, though they felt completely disconnected from his body, like someone else was controlling them remotely from a great distance. He walked toward the door, like a man underwater, everything moving in slow motion, distorted and wrong and impossible to process properly. His hand touched the door handle. Metal, cold, real. He looked back one last time, hoping desperately for something, anything, that would make this absolute nightmare make sense. Vanetta was helping Layla taste pink frosting from a bowl, wiping chocolate from her daughter's chin with a gentleness that made his heart physically ache in his chest, laughing at something the little girl said that he couldn't hear from this distance. She looked happy. She looked whole. She looked like someone who had built a beautiful life from ashes and didn't need the man who'd let her burn, who'd given up searching too soon, who'd accepted her death and moved on with his comfortable, privileged life. Noah walked out into Miami heat that felt like ice against his skin, into a world that would never make sense again, into a future that had just become completely unrecognizable and terrifying. Chapter 2. The Man Who Stopped Living. Noah sat in his Mercedes outside Sweet Rise's bakery for 4 hours after the lights went dark inside, watching his breath fog the windshield despite the Miami heat that pressed against the car like a living, breathing thing trying to suffocate him slowly. His mind replayed the same moment on an endless, torturous loop that he couldn't stop no matter how hard he tried. Vanetta locking the bakery door with practiced efficiency, keys jangling musically. Layla asleep on her shoulder, small body trusting and completely safe in her mother's strong arms, one small hand clutching Vanetta's shirt. Loading her daughter into a Honda Civic that had clearly seen better years, the passenger door making a grinding sound that meant it desperately needed mechanical work soon. Driving away without a single glance at the luxury Mercedes that everyone else always noticed and commented on, that screamed wealth and privilege and everything Vanetta apparently wanted nothing to do with anymore. He followed them without thinking about it, without questioning whether this made him a stalker or a desperate man or something worse, without caring about anything except not losing sight of her again after just finding her alive. Not close enough to intrude or frighten, keeping several car lengths back, but close enough to see exactly where she went when she left the bakery. Vanetta parked at a modest apartment complex his mother would dismiss as unfortunate without a second thought, the kind of place she'd never set foot in. The kind of place with cracked pavement in the parking lot and flickering security lights that barely worked and laundry hanging from half the balconies because people couldn't afford dryers or didn't trust the shared machines. He watched lights flicker on in a second-floor unit with curtains that didn't quite close properly, leaving gaps. Watched shadows move behind thin curtains that provided minimal privacy. Watched until every single window went dark around midnight. And still he sat there in his car, unable to leave, unable to move forward or backward, unable to reconcile the dead woman in his memories with the living, breathing one he'd just seen. His phone buzzed insistently against the passenger seat where he'd tossed it hours ago. Gabrielle, his fiancée, the woman his mother had carefully, strategically introduced him to after 3 years of intensive grief counseling, had failed to resurrect the man who died along with Vonetta. The woman who was beautiful and appropriate and accomplished and everything Vonetta wasn't supposed to be according to his mother's exacting standards. Safe, expected, suitable for a Henry. Breathing. He didn't answer the call. He couldn't. What would he even say? How could he explain any of this? Instead, Noah's mind dragged him backward through time against his will, through the last moment he'd seen Vonetta alive 4 years ago, his penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay with floor-to-ceiling windows that his mother had helped him purchase as an investment in his future. A fight about his mother's constant interference that he couldn't even remember the specific details of now, every word completely erased by what came after, by the grief that had swallowed everything else whole. Vonetta had left angry that night, told him she needed space to think, needed time to figure things out, needed him to make a real choice between her and Isabella's suffocating control over every aspect of his life. He'd let her go, arrogant enough to believe she'd come back like she always did after their arguments. She always came back after their fights, usually within a day or two. Except she didn't. Not this time. This time was different in ways he hadn't understood until too late. 1 week of silence that felt normal enough at first, not particularly concerning given the severity of their argument. They'd fought before about his mother, about Isabella's constant interference and thinly veiled disapproval of their relationship. 2 weeks that started feeling distinctly wrong in ways he couldn't quite articulate, a growing unease in his gut that something wasn't right. 3 weeks where real panic set in like cold water, filling his lungs slowly, drowning him from the inside. He'd called her phone 57 times over those weeks, left voicemails that went from annoyed to concerned to desperate to begging her to just talk to him, shown up at her apartment repeatedly to find it completely empty and stripped bare, a new tenant already moving furniture in who knew nothing about the previous occupant and seemed annoyed by his questions, called her friends who suddenly wouldn't meet his eyes directly and made transparent excuses about not knowing where she'd gone. Called her workplace to learn she'd quit without any notice, just stopped showing up one day without explanation. Then his mother's hand on his shoulder one grey January morning, her voice uncharacteristically gentle in a way that should have been his first warning that something was terribly, horribly wrong. "Baby, I need you to sit down first. There's been a terrible accident. Car crash in Atlanta. Body burned beyond recognition in the resulting fire. Dental records used for identification because there was nothing else left to identify." His mother had handled absolutely everything with quiet, efficient grace. The cremation arrangements, the memorial service with Vonetta's family that Noah had never actually met before that day. Even arranging intensive grief counseling when Noah screamed that the timeline was wrong, that the story didn't make any sense. That Vonetta would never just vanish to Atlanta without telling him first, without leaving some kind of message or explanation, but he'd tried to investigate, hadn't he? That first week after the funeral, he'd hired a private investigator. A good one, supposedly. The man had returned after 2 weeks with nothing. No accident reports matching the details, no hospital records, no police reports, but the detective explained it away easily. Said small accidents in rural Georgia sometimes weren't properly documented, said the fire had destroyed most evidence, said sometimes people just disappeared and you had to accept it. Noah had wanted to push harder, but Isabella had held him while he shattered completely into pieces, had whispered soothing platitudes about acceptance and moving forward, and how some people weren't meant to stay in our lives forever, how death was part of life's natural cycle that everyone had to accept eventually. She'd been so convincing, so gentle, so unlike her usual self. "I know this is unbearably hard, sweetheart, but you have to accept it eventually. She's gone. You have to let her go and live your life. She'd want you to be happy." After 6 months of hitting walls everywhere he turned, of the investigator finding nothing useful, of his mother's gentle insistence that he was torturing himself needlessly, he stopped fighting quite so hard against the inevitable. After a year, he stopped crying himself to sleep every single night. After 3 years, when his mother introduced him to Gabrielle, daughter of a business associate, perfect in every way that didn't actually matter to his broken heart, he agreed to marry her without much resistance. Not because he loved Gabrielle, though she was genuinely kind and beautiful, and everything anyone could reasonably want in a partner, because it didn't matter anymore when you were already dead inside, when your heart had been buried with someone 4 years ago and never recovered, when going through the motions of living was easier than explaining why you couldn't. But Vonetta wasn't dead. Vonetta wasn't even gone from Miami, wasn't hiding in some remote location. Vonetta was alive and apparently thriving, making beautiful cakes that people drove across the city to buy, raising a daughter who had his eyes and his smile and his grandmother's stubborn chin. Treating Noah like a complete stranger who meant absolutely less than nothing to her daily existence. The cruelty of it carved deeper than grief had ever managed to cut into him. At least death was final and absolute and gave you closure. At least death couldn't look at you with clear recognition in its eyes and choose to pretend complete ignorance. At least death didn't have your daughter's laugh echoing in your ears while you drowned in questions that had no answers, that might never have answers no matter how hard you searched. Noah stared at Vonetta's apartment building until sunrise painted Miami in shades of pink and gold and orange that hurt to look at, colors too bright for the darkness inside him, until his eyes burned from not blinking and his throat ached from not screaming out his confusion and pain. The city woke up slowly around him in waves. People left for work in professional clothes, carrying coffee and briefcases. Children walked to bus stops with backpacks, laughing with friends about whatever children found funny. Life continued its relentless march forward, while Noah sat frozen in the wreckage of everything he'd believed was true, everything he'd accepted as unchangeable fact. He whispered to his steering wheel, to the ghost who'd become real, to the emptiness inside him that was somehow infinitely worse than mourning had ever been. What did they do to you? What the hell happened? Why did you let me think you were dead for 4 years? But that was the wrong question entirely. The question that would eventually destroy him completely when he finally found its answer was simpler, sharper, infinitely more devastating than any truth about what had been done to Vonetta by outside forces. The real question wasn't what had been done to her. The real question was, what had he failed to do? What obvious signs had he missed in his comfortable life? What had he been too blind, too trusting, too comfortable in his privilege to see happening right in front of him? What did I do wrong? How did I fail her so completely that she'd rather let me think she was dead than ever see me again? Chapter 3. The Queen of Ashes. Noah returned to Sweet Rise's bakery at opening time the next morning, before the city had properly woken up from sleep, before rush-hour traffic clogged the streets with frustrated commuters, before he could talk himself out of completely shattering whatever remained of his questionable sanity. 6 in the morning. The sun was barely up, painting the sky in watercolor pastels of pink and orange. Vonetta was already there through the glass door, hands deep in bread dough, working with the focused intensity of someone who'd built everything from absolute nothing and couldn't afford to stop moving forward, even for a single moment. Layla was coloring carefully at a corner table, tongue sticking out in fierce concentration, humming a song Noah didn't recognize but found oddly soothing. Both of them existing in a complete, self-contained world he'd been thoroughly and deliberately excluded from, a life he knew absolutely nothing about, despite once believing he knew everything about Vonetta. He walked in without knocking, without waiting for permission or invitation. The bell above the door announced his presence with cheerful chimes that felt obscene given the circumstances. Vonetta didn't look up from her work, didn't acknowledge him at all beyond a slight tensing of her shoulders that told him she knew exactly who had just entered her space. "We're not open yet. Come back at 7 if you need something." "I buried you." Noah's voice sounded like something dredged from deep water, rough and damaged beyond repair. "I had a memorial service in a church with stained glass windows in Connecticut. I stood in front of 200 people and talked about you in past tense, about our future that would never happen now. Your mother was there in the front row wearing black. Your sister sat beside her crying. Your aunt gave a beautiful eulogy about your childhood. I met your entire family for the first time at your funeral. I grieved with them like we were all suffering the same loss. I cried with strangers who claimed to have loved you. And yet here I am, alive and well and thriving. Vanetta interrupted without looking up from her work, still kneading dough with methodical precision that spoke of years of practice. Her hands working with practiced efficiency that came from repetition and muscle memory. Life's full of surprises, isn't it? Now get out of my bakery before I call the police and have you forcibly removed from the premises for trespassing. Noah stepped closer, something desperate and wild clawing up his throat like a trapped animal trying to escape. That little girl, Layla. Is she mine? She has my eyes, my grandmother's nose. She looks exactly like my baby pictures. Is she mine? Vanetta's hands stopped moving abruptly, frozen mid-knead. The temperature in the bakery dropped what felt like 20 degrees in an instant, frost forming on every surface, on every word between them. That little girl is none of your concern whatsoever. She has everything she needs and more. A mother who loves her unconditionally, a safe home where she's protected, stability, security, everything that matters. You show up here again talking about my daughter, asking questions you have no right to ask, and I will call the police for harassment without a moment's hesitation. I will get a restraining order so fast your head will spin. I will make your comfortable life very, very difficult. Do you understand me perfectly, Mr. Henry? I looked for you, Noah said, and he was openly begging now, all dignity abandoned somewhere between seeing her alive yesterday and accepting that she genuinely wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. For months, for over a year, I hired investigators, 3 different ones because the first 2 found nothing. They told me you were dead in a car accident in Atlanta. They showed me official death certificates with stamps and signatures and seals. They had your family at a memorial service who cried real tears and shared memories of you growing up. They had photographs of a burned car. They had dental records that matched. How was I supposed to know it was fake? Finally, Vanetta looked directly at him with eyes that made him take an involuntary step backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. Her eyes were ancient in a way that had nothing to do with chronological age. Eyes that had seen things that aged you past your capacity for softness, past your ability to trust anyone or anything, past your willingness to believe in redemption or second chances for people who'd failed you when it mattered most. Eyes that had been beautiful once and were still beautiful now, but in a completely different way, in a way that warned you explicitly not to touch, not to hope, not to believe salvation was possible for men who failed women the way Noah had obviously failed her catastrophically. I know exactly what they told you, Noah. I know everything they told you down to the smallest detail because I helped plan some of it. And you believed it without question. You accepted my death without even demanding to see an actual body in a casket before it was cremated. You buried an empty casket in frozen ground. You moved on with your life. You gave up on me. The words hit like bullets fired at close range, each one finding its target with devastating accuracy, leaving holes he'd never be able to patch. That's not fair. I didn't know it was fake. How could I have known? The investigators found nothing. Your family was there. Real people crying real tears. How was I fair? Vanetta's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood, to leave permanent scars on his psyche that would never fully heal. You want to talk to me about what's fair? About justice? I was pregnant, Noah. 6 months pregnant with your child growing inside me. Do you know what 6 months pregnant looks like on a woman's body? It looks like you can't hide it anymore under loose clothing no matter how hard you try. It looks like the father has a right to know the truth about his child. It looks like you have to tell him face to face or live with the lie forever and poison your own soul. So I came to your building specifically to tell you the truth. Noah's face went completely white, all blood draining away to his core. His hands started shaking violently at his sides, uncontrollable tremors. Your security guards turned me away at the door like I was trash to be discarded, said you'd moved on already with someone more appropriate for your social class, said you never wanted to see me again under any circumstances, said if I came back and made a scene or caused problems, there would be serious legal consequences for me to face. She was walking toward him now, powerful and controlled, every word a calculated strike designed to wound as deeply as possible. So I waited outside your building like some pathetic fool for 7 hours straight. In January, cold enough that I couldn't feel my fingers or toes anymore, hoping you'd come out eventually, hoping you'd see me standing there waiting. You never did. You want to know why you never came out? Noah couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there and take every devastating hit she delivered. Because your mother had you at her estate that entire weekend. Family emergency, she told your staff very convincingly. How perfectly, conveniently timed. Vonetta stopped just inches from him now, close enough that he could see faint scars on her hands that hadn't been there 4 years ago, evidence of a life he knew nothing about, hardships he couldn't begin to imagine. But I didn't give up then, did I? I tried everything I could think of. I called every number I had for you. I sent emails. I showed up at your office building downtown. I tried to reach your friends, your colleagues, anyone who might get a message to you, but every single avenue was blocked. Your phone disconnected. My emails bounced back. Your office said you were traveling indefinitely, and then exactly 3 days later, my landlord evicted me with zero notice or explanation. She paused, letting that sink in. Then I lost my job the following week. Suddenly my performance wasn't satisfactory after 3 years of excellent reviews and raises and promotions. Then men in expensive dark suits started following me everywhere I went, watching my apartment, following me to the grocery store. Then my bank account was mysteriously frozen without explanation from the bank. Then I understood something very, very clearly. Understood what? That someone with serious money wanted me gone permanently from your life. That someone powerful had decided I was a problem to be eliminated by any means necessary, regardless of collateral damage. And you know what I did when I finally understood that? Vonetta's smile was savage and beautiful and absolutely terrible to witness. I fought back. For 2 more weeks I fought. I went to police, but they said there was no crime. I went to lawyers, but none would take my case against your family. I tried to go public, but no journalist would touch the story. Your mother had thought of everything. So what happened? She sent me a document, Vonetta said quietly. A psychiatric evaluation declaring me mentally unstable, delusional about my relationship with you. A danger to myself. It gave her legal grounds to have me committed involuntarily if I didn't disappear. So I had a choice that wasn't really a choice. Disappear completely and raise my baby, or be locked in a psychiatric facility where they'd take my child at birth. So I left. I took my unborn daughter, and I disappeared from the city. Better to let you think I was dead and buried 6 feet under than let your family destroy my child before she was even born into this cruel world. The bakery felt too small suddenly, oxygen vanishing from the enclosed space, walls pressing in from all sides, like a trash compactor slowly crushing them both. Noah tried desperately to form words, to explain himself, to fix what was clearly broken beyond any possible repair, but Vonetta wasn't remotely finished destroying him yet, wasn't done making him understand the full scope of what had happened. I slept in my car for 4 months, Noah, 4 entire months. In parking lots across 3 different states, moving every single night so security guards wouldn't call police on the pregnant homeless woman who couldn't afford anything better. I worked under completely fake names for cash that barely covered food, let alone prenatal care or vitamins. I gave birth in a free clinic where the nurse actually asked me multiple times if I wanted to give the baby up for adoption, because clearly I couldn't provide for her properly in my situation. I held my newborn daughter in a bathroom for 2 hours because they needed the bed for someone with actual insurance, and I cried harder than I'd cried in my entire life because I'd never felt more alone in the entire universe. Where were you during all of that suffering? Where were you when I needed you most? I didn't know. I swear on everything I didn't. You didn't care enough to keep looking for answers that made sense. The truth was simple and absolutely devastating in its clarity. You accepted my death in 3 months. 3 months, Noah. 12 weeks. 90 days. You gave up on finding the truth about what really happened. You moved on with your comfortable life. You found someone new and appropriate and safe. Someone your mother approved of, I'm absolutely sure. So don't come into my bakery with your shock and your pain and your guilt like they mean something to me now after all this time. They don't. They mean absolutely nothing. She walked past him toward the back room where Layla was calling for her, asking about breakfast and whether they could have pancakes this morning. Noah stood frozen, unable to move, unable to process, unable to accept that he'd failed someone this completely and never even known it was happening right under his nose. Vanetta paused at the doorway, looking back at him one final time, with something that might have been pity, if pity didn't require actually caring about someone's suffering. You want to know the absolute worst part of all of this? I waited for you even after everything they did to me, even after losing everything I'd built. I thought maybe you'd figure it out eventually. Maybe you'd realize the story didn't make sense, that the timeline was wrong. Maybe you'd love me enough to question the convenient narrative they fed you. But you didn't. You just accepted it without serious question and moved on with your perfect life while I built mine from literally nothing but determination. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Cruelty. Noah didn't go home to his penthouse overlooking the bay. He didn't go to his office where important meetings were probably piling up and people were wondering where their CEO had disappeared to. He drove straight to his mother's sprawling estate in Coral Gables, past the iron gates he'd grown up behind feeling trapped, through the perfectly manicured gardens his mother tended with more genuine care and attention than she'd ever given him as a child growing up. It was barely 7 in the morning, but Isabella was already on the terrace having her usual breakfast, immaculate as always in cream linen that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, untouchable as always, reading the financial section like the world wasn't actively burning down around them in flames. Noah didn't bother with greetings or social pleasantries or pretending everything was fine. Did you kill her? Did you actually murder her and make it look like an accident to get rid of her? Isabella looked up from her coffee slowly, completely unruffled by the accusation, barely interested in his obvious distress and disheveled appearance. Good morning to you too, darling. Have you been drinking? You look absolutely unwell. Sit down before you fall down and hurt yourself. Vanetta. Noah's hands were shaking so badly he had to shove them deep in his pockets to hide the tremors from her sharp, observant eyes. Did you kill her? Tell me the truth for once in your entire life. Don't be so dramatic, Noah. It's unbecoming of a man your age and position in society. Isabella sighed like he was being tedious and childish, like he was a toddler throwing an embarrassing tantrum over something completely insignificant. Have some coffee and sit down properly. Let's discuss this situation like rational adults, instead of you standing there shouting wild accusations at me. Noah slammed both hands on the breakfast table hard enough to rattle all the expensive porcelain, hard enough to make crystal glasses jump, hard enough to make his mother's personal assistant retreat quickly inside the house to give them privacy for whatever storm was coming. She's alive. Vanetta is alive and well. She has a daughter who looks exactly like me. My daughter. A child I never knew existed for 3 years. And you made me think she was dead for 4 years. You made me bury an empty casket in January snow while I fell apart. Isabella's fork paused mid-air, a piece of melon suspended and forgotten. For exactly 3 seconds, absolute silence blanketed the terrace like a heavy curtain falling. Birds stopped singing in the trees, wind stopped moving through the palm fronds. The city seemed to hold its breath waiting. Then his mother set down her fork with the same deliberate care she'd used his entire life when something threatened her carefully constructed world and plans. Impossible. That's completely impossible. I saw the death certificate myself with my own eyes. I personally arranged the cremation with the funeral home director. I spoke directly with the medical examiner in Atlanta. I handled every single detail myself to spare you the administrative burden during your grief. I paid for the funeral, arranged for her family to attend, made sure everything was done properly. How could she possibly be alive? Are you sure it was actually her? Perhaps someone who resembles her? Noah's laugh sounded genuinely insane even to his own ears, harsh and broken and wrong. You saw what you created yourself. You arranged what you fabricated with help from people you paid off. She's alive, in Miami, not even hiding from anyone, running a successful bakery called Sweet Rises that's apparently quite popular and well-reviewed. She told me everything yesterday when I confronted her. The eviction, the job loss, the men following her everywhere, the psychiatric evaluation you had fabricated. She told me you systematically destroyed her entire life until she had absolutely no choice but to disappear completely from the city and pretend to be dead. Isabella stood with fluid grace, suddenly focused in a way that made Noah's skin crawl with instinctive dread, with primal recognition of danger. When his mother got quiet like this, got this calculated and cold and focused, people's lives changed permanently and irrevocably, usually for the worse. And she had a child. When exactly? She's 3 years old now. Do the math yourself, mother. 6 months pregnant when you drove her away. His mother walked slowly to the terrace edge, looking out over grounds that cost more to maintain monthly than most people earned in an entire year of hard work. Her silence stretched far too long, far too calculated and deliberate. When she finally turned back around to face him, her face had shifted into something Noah barely recognized anymore, something cold and alien. Not anger, not shock, not even surprise, really. Just absolutely cold calculation and assessment of the situation, of the threat this represented. I did what mothers do when they love their children deeply. I protected you from a catastrophic mistake that would have completely ruined your life and destroyed everything I've spent decades building for this family and our legacy. You made me bury an empty casket. Noah's voice broke like shattered glass, like broken mirrors reflecting nothing but distorted images. You made me grieve for years thinking she was dead. You made me speak at a memorial service for a woman who wasn't even dead, who was alive and suffering. You introduced me to her entire family who weren't actually her family at all. Her mother who held my hand and cried, her sister who shared childhood stories, her aunt who gave that beautiful eulogy about her kindness. How did you even manage that level of elaborate deception? How much did that cost you? Professional actors from New York. Isabella's response was casual, like discussing grocery shopping or yesterday's weather patterns. Very good ones, I might add. Expensive, but absolutely worth every penny I paid them for their performances. It needed to feel completely real and authentic for you to accept it emotionally and move forward with your life. You were being stubborn about letting go of her, about accepting that she wasn't suitable for our family. You needed proper closure to heal and move on to someone appropriate. Noah felt the entire world tilt sideways underneath him, his sense of reality completely shattered. You hired professional actors to play her grieving family members at a fake funeral. You fabricated an entire memorial service. You falsified government death certificates. Do you understand that's illegal? That's fraud. I saved you from a gold-digging opportunist with a conveniently timed pregnancy specifically designed to trap you into marriage and access to family money. Isabella's composure cracked slightly, genuine annoyance bleeding through her perfect facade for the first time. You were 26 years old, Noah. She was a scholarship student from nowhere, with nothing to her name, no family connections worth mentioning, no money, no prospects for the future. What possible future did that relationship have? You would have thrown away everything, your entire future and family legacy, for some romantic notion that would have crumbled within a year once reality and financial pressures set in. I loved her more than anything in this world. She was everything to me. You loved the idea of rebellion against me and everything I represent. Isabella's voice went soft and dangerous, the voice she used in boardrooms when systematically destroying competitors who underestimated her. I eliminated the problem efficiently and permanently. She clearly agreed with my assessment of the situation initially, because she took the money I offered her to disappear and left quietly. I'm sure she's done very well for herself with that seed money. That bakery sounds quite profitable from what you're describing. Perhaps I did her a favor." Noah stared at his mother, like seeing a monster for the first time, like the woman who'd raised him had been wearing an elaborate mask his entire life, and it had finally slipped completely off to reveal the truth underneath. The calculations, the complete lack of empathy. She didn't take your money willingly. She fled in absolute terror for her life and her unborn child. She was 6 months pregnant with my child growing inside her, and you terrorized her into vanishing from the city completely through threats and intimidation. Semantics and interpretation based on perspective. Isabella shrugged elegantly, returning to her breakfast like they'd been casually discussing weather patterns or stock market fluctuations. "The point is, you moved on successfully just as I planned. You're engaged to Gabrielle, a wonderful woman from an excellent family with proper connections and old money. Your company is thriving beyond all projections. The merger will make us both extremely wealthy beyond what we already have. This is all very inconvenient timing for you to discover this, but it doesn't actually change anything material about your situation or obligations. Whatever you think you're going to do with this information, remember who you are. Remember where you come from. Remember what you owe this family and its legacy that I've spent my entire life building." Noah's response was quiet, certain, absolutely final in its conviction. "It changes everything about who I am and who I want to be." He walked away, leaving his mother on the terrace with her breakfast and her newspapers and her complete lack of remorse. As his car pulled through the estate gates for what he suspected might be the last time, he didn't see Isabella pull out her phone with practiced efficiency, didn't hear her make a call to someone whose entire job was solving problems that threatened the Henry family's interests and reputation. Find out everything about a bakery in Miami, Sweet Rises, owner Vanetta Flowers. I need a complete background check and financial analysis by tonight, everything you can possibly find. A pause while she listened to confirmation. "And find out if she can be bought this time with enough money. Everyone has a price if you find it and offer enough. If she doesn't have one, find her weakness and exploit it ruthlessly. There's always a weakness to exploit if you look hard enough and apply the right pressure." She hung up, looking thoughtful while finishing her breakfast calmly. This time she'd finish what she'd started 4 years ago. This time there would be no miraculous resurrection or second chances for either of them. Chapter 5. The Price of Admission. Noah hired the absolute best private investigator in Miami within an hour of leaving his mother's estate, a man whose specialty was uncovering exactly what powerful people desperately tried to hide from public view. Not to investigate Vanetta and her life, but to investigate precisely what his mother had done to her 4 years ago, what he'd apparently been too blind or too trusting to see at the time. He paid triple the normal rate for speed and discretion, for the kind of thorough destruction of privacy that serious money could buy when applied correctly through the right channels. The investigator promised results in 48 hours maximum. It took 36 because the man was genuinely good at his job and highly motivated by the money. The folder the investigator handed him at a coffee shop in Wynwood was surprisingly thin, maybe 20 pages total. The contents destroyed Noah's world more completely than Vanetta's resurrection had the day before yesterday. Bank records showing direct payments from Isabella Henry's personal checking account, meticulously documented and time-stamped. $15,000 to Vanetta's former landlord, marked carefully and deliberately as consulting fees to avoid tax scrutiny and suspicion. $8,000 to her previous employer for unspecified services rendered, paid in cash to avoid paper trails. $25,000 to a private security company that specialized in intimidation and surveillance of targets, legal but ethically questionable. $50,000 to a lawyer for document preparation and filing, some of which was clearly illegal but untraceable. $100,000 to a crematorium in Atlanta that, when contacted by the investigator posing as a distant relative searching for records, had absolutely no record of ever receiving a body matching Vanetta's description or any Jane Doe around that specific time period. His mother had built an elaborate prison around Vanetta, made entirely of paper and money, and systematic pressure applied to every vulnerable point in her life. And it had worked absolutely perfectly, because money always worked when applied with sufficient pressure to the right vulnerable pressure points. But the worst part, the detail that made Noah's hands shake so badly he spilled hot coffee across the table without even noticing the burn on his skin, was a notarized document from a licensed psychiatrist with an impressive credential list. A complete psychiatric evaluation of Vanetta Flowers, declaring her mentally unstable, prone to dangerous delusions about her relationship with Noah Henry, a potential danger to herself and possibly others if left untreated in society. The document was dated exactly 1 week before Vanetta vanished completely from the city, when she would have been 6 months pregnant and increasingly desperate to tell Noah the truth about the baby. It provided clear legal grounds for involuntary psychiatric commitment if she ever attempted to contact the Henry family again through any means whatsoever. She hadn't just been driven away through inconvenience and pressure. She'd been given a choice that wasn't actually a choice at all. Disappear completely and voluntarily, or be declared legally insane and locked away in an institution where her pregnancy would be managed by state authorities and the baby potentially taken at birth and put into the foster system. What kind of choice was that for a terrified woman carrying a child she already loved desperately? Noah spent the next week drowning in evidence and guilt that felt like quicksand pulling him under slowly but inevitably. His engagement party to Gabrielle was rapidly approaching, only 3 weeks away now, according to the calendar mocking him from his phone. Gabrielle kept asking with increasing concern what was wrong, why he seemed so distant and distracted lately, whether he was having serious second thoughts about their marriage and future together. He couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't possibly admit that his fiancée was essentially a placeholder for a woman who'd been disappeared like a political dissident in some authoritarian country where human rights were polite suggestions rather than enforceable laws. He went back to Sweet Rise's bakery every single day that week, always at different times, trying desperately to catch Vanetta alone without customers or employees around to witness whatever conversation or confrontation might happen. She was always there, always working from before dawn until after dark, building something beautiful and profitable with her hands while he destroyed things with his family's blood money and influence. This particular time, Noah waited until she closed up the bakery completely, until the last employee had left for the night, until she walked to her car with keys in hand and obvious exhaustion settling into her shoulders like a physical weight. He stepped directly in front of her car before she could get in and drive away. "I have proof, evidence of everything my mother did to you 4 years ago. Payments, forged documents, psychiatric evaluations that were fabricated, all of it documented with bank records and timestamps. I'm going to destroy her completely. I'm going to make her pay for every single thing she did to you and our daughter. I'm going to expose her publicly and—" Vanetta laughed, and the sound was heartbreaking in its weariness and resignation. Not cruel, not bitter, just profoundly tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying impossible weight for too long, from fighting battles nobody else sees or acknowledges or understands, from surviving when dying would have been so much easier and more peaceful. Destroy her. Noah, she's your mother. You think some papers change that fundamental biological relationship? You think you're suddenly the hero now because you found evidence of what I already knew happened to me 4 years ago. You think documentation makes you brave. She took years from us, from our daughter who doesn't even know I exist as her father. Vanetta stepped close, and her voice went quiet in a way that made Noah desperately wish she'd yell and scream instead, because quiet rage was so much worse. Our daughter? You think saying those 2 words magically gives you parental rights? I was homeless, Noah, genuinely homeless for months. I slept in my car in different parking lots across 3 states, moved every single night so security guards wouldn't call police on the pregnant woman who couldn't afford rent anywhere. I stole food from gas stations when I got desperate enough, stuffed granola bars and protein bars in my jacket pockets because I was literally starving. I worked under completely fake names for cash, that barely covered prenatal vitamins, let alone actual medical care or checkups. Your mother made sure I couldn't exist legally anywhere, couldn't open bank accounts, couldn't rent apartments under my real name without being found and harassed. She wasn't yelling, wasn't crying, wasn't doing anything but stating facts that cut deeper than any emotion ever could. Facts that painted a picture of suffering he couldn't begin to comprehend. I gave birth in a free clinic where the nurse actually asked me multiple times if I wanted to give the baby up for adoption. Said it might be better for her, better for me, considering my situation and prospects for the future. I held my newborn daughter in a bathroom for 2 hours because they needed the bed for someone with actual insurance, and I cried harder than I'd ever cried in my entire life. Not from physical pain of childbirth, from complete loneliness, from absolute terror of failing her, from knowing I was entirely alone with a child who deserved so much better than what I could give her in that moment. Where were you while I was literally begging the universe for help that never came? Where were you when your daughter was born? I didn't know anything about this. I swear on everything I hold sacred. You didn't care enough to keep looking for answers that made actual sense instead of the convenient story they fed you. The truth was simple and absolutely devastating in its clarity and finality. You accepted my death in 3 months. 3 months, Noah, 12 weeks, 90 days total of pretending to search before giving up. You gave up on finding the truth about what really happened to me. You moved on with your comfortable life and routine. You found someone new and appropriate and safe. Someone your mother approved of, I'm absolutely sure. So don't come to my workplace with your evidence and your guilt like they're gifts I asked for or wanted. They're not. They mean absolutely nothing to me now after all this time has passed. She walked past him to her car, determined to end this conversation. Noah stood frozen in the parking lot, the folder in his hands suddenly completely meaningless. All that carefully gathered proof worthless when measured against the only opinion that actually mattered to him. Vanetta paused before getting into her Honda, looking back at him one final time with eyes that had forgotten how to hope for anything good from anyone, especially from him. You want to destroy your mother? Go ahead. Burn down your whole family and empire if it makes you feel better about yourself and your choices. Expose her crimes, send her to prison. But it won't change what you did to me. It won't change that when it mattered most, when I needed you desperately, when our daughter was being born in a bathroom. You gave up on me without a real fight. She got in her car and drove away, leaving Noah standing alone in an empty parking lot with evidence that meant nothing. Chapter 6. The Unbearable Mirror. Noah went back to his mother's estate the very next morning with lawyers in expensive suits carrying briefcases with divorce papers for his trust fund that would separate him financially from her control permanently, with evidence that could realistically send Isabella to prison for fraud and falsification of official government documents. He laid it all out on her breakfast table with cold precision, with the methodical cruelty of someone who'd learned tactics from the absolute best manipulator he'd ever known. Isabella listened calmly while her personal lawyer carefully reviewed the documents with increasing concern and alarm. Then she said something that changed everything in Noah's mind, that planted a seed of doubt he couldn't quite uproot, no matter how hard he tried to rationalize it away. You think I'm the villain in this story? That's genuinely touching, really. But ask yourself something important, Noah. Something I've been wondering about. Ask Vanetta why she never called you directly on your personal cell phone. She had your number memorized, knew it by heart. She could have found a way to reach you if she really wanted to badly enough, if she'd been truly desperate. Ask her why, when security turned her away from your building that one time, she didn't make a scene big enough to get your attention, didn't call police herself, didn't fight back at all against what was happening to her. She just left without resistance after one setback. Why would someone who truly loved you, who was carrying your child inside her body, give up so easily after one rejected attempt? The question planted itself in Noah's brain like a parasitic worm burrowing deep. Because you terrorized her into silence with threats. Did I, though? Or did I simply apply standard pressure and she folded immediately because she wasn't strong enough for this life we lead, this level of scrutiny and challenge? Isabella's smile was knowing, calculated, specifically designed to make him question everything he thought he knew about Vanetta. Some people aren't built for difficulty, Noah. They crumble under the slightest resistance when things get hard. I simply provided some resistance to test her character. If she truly loved you, truly wanted that baby to have a father, she would have fought much harder than she did. She didn't fight at all from what I observed. Think carefully about what that says about her character and commitment. Noah left without another word, but the question haunted him through the entire day, through meetings he couldn't focus on at all, through dinner with Gabrielle, where he barely spoke more than necessary monosyllables. That night, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, unable to silence the doubt eating at him from the inside, he waited outside Vanetta's apartment until he saw lights flicker on around 9 in the evening. He knocked firmly on her door, his heart pounding. When she answered with Layla, peeking curiously around her legs with sleepy eyes, already in pajamas, he asked the question that was systematically destroying him from the inside out. "Why didn't you call me directly? You had my personal cell number memorized. You could have texted, called repeatedly, left voicemails until I answered eventually. Why didn't you keep trying?" Vanetta stared at him for a long moment, something like pity crossing her face. She told Layla to play in her room for a few minutes with her toys. When her daughter was gone, when it was just them in the doorway with Miami humidity pressing in like a physical weight, she spoke with careful patience, like explaining something complex to a child who kept missing the point. "I did call, Noah. 17 times over 2 days. Your number said it was disconnected every single time I tried. Your mother had it changed without telling you. Routed all your incoming calls through her office for that entire month so she could screen everything. She told people you were going through a difficult breakup and needed space from painful reminders of your ex-girlfriend. She was very convincing, apparently." Noah's stomach dropped into absolute freefall, a sickening sensation. Then why not email, social media messages, show up at my office building downtown during business hours, something else that would reach me? Vanetta's eyes filled with something that looked like exhausted patience for a child who stubbornly refused to understand basic concepts no matter how clearly they were explained to him. "I tried absolutely everything available to me, Noah. Everything I could possibly think of. I sent emails from 3 different accounts that all bounced back as undeliverable, like my email addresses had been blacklisted somehow. I messaged you on every single social media platform to find my accounts had been blocked by someone with administrative access to your accounts. I went to your office building multiple times, at least 5 times over 2 weeks, to be told you were traveling indefinitely for business in Europe. After a month of hitting walls everywhere I turned, after security at your building turned me away from your home multiple times with threats, after losing everything I'd built in my life, I started to wonder if maybe you did know what was happening to me. If maybe you had told her to make me disappear from your life. Because that's what rich men do when poor women get inconveniently pregnant with children they don't want, isn't it? They make the problem disappear quietly." The accusation hung between them like smoke, like poison gas, like truth he couldn't quite deny convincingly, even to himself. "You think I knew? You think I wanted any of this to happen?" I didn't know what to think anymore after everything that happened. Vanetta's voice cracked slightly for the first time, showing real emotion. "Your mother is powerful, yes, I understood that. But you're not a child, Noah. You have resources of your own. You have intelligence. You have connections throughout the city. If you really wanted to find me, if you really believed I was worth fighting for, you would have found a way eventually. You would have questioned the convenient story they gave you. Unless you didn't want to, unless some part of you was relieved when I disappeared and solved your problem with your mother." Noah felt something crack inside his chest, something that might have been his capacity for self-deception finally shattering completely and irreparably. "I would never want that. I loved you with everything I had in me. But you did want it in some way through your actions and choices." Vanetta's words were simple, devastating. "You stopped actively looking after 3 months. You accepted a death without demanding to see an actual body in a casket before cremation. You moved on with your life. You got engaged to someone appropriate your mother hand-selected for you. Whatever your conscious intentions were, your actions spoke clearly enough about your true priorities and what mattered most to you. Layla came running out in her princess pajamas, interrupting with the perfect timing of children who sensed tension without understanding it at all. "Mama, is the sad man staying for stories tonight? I want him to read the dragon book." Vanetta looked at her daughter, then at Noah, and in her eyes was a question that had nothing to do with bedtime stories and everything to do with whether he was capable of staying when staying was hard, when staying required more than money or grand gestures or good intentions expressed in words. "Would you like him to stay for one story, baby?" Layla nodded enthusiastically, bouncing on her toes. Vanetta's gaze returned to Noah, measuring, testing, giving him one chance he absolutely didn't deserve based on anything he'd done so far. "Then he can stay for one story. Just stories tonight, nothing more." Chapter 7. The Drowning. Noah did something he'd never done in his entire privileged life. He told the complete truth even when it destroyed him, even when it cost him everything he'd spent years building, even when easier lies were readily available and would have been so much more comfortable for everyone involved. That night, after leaving Vanetta's apartment, where he'd read Layla 3 stories instead of 1, because she kept begging for more and watched her fall asleep with innocent trust, he went directly to Gabrielle's penthouse in Brickell, his fiancée, the woman he was supposed to marry in 2 weeks, the woman whose father's company was merging with his in a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He told her everything without holding anything back about Vanetta, about the daughter he'd just discovered existed, about loving someone he'd thought was dead for 4 years, about the engagement being a lie he'd told himself to keep breathing and functioning in society. Gabrielle listened without interrupting, sitting perfectly still on her white leather couch while Miami glittered below them through floor-to-ceiling windows, while their carefully planned future dissolved between them like sugar in rain. When he finished his confession, when silence stretched too long and became uncomfortable and heavy, she said something that gutted him with its unexpected kindness and grace under pressure. "You have a daughter, a 3-year-old little girl." Noah nodded, unable to speak past the growing lump in his throat that threatened to choke him. "And you love her mother still after all this time, after believing she was dead?" Noah nodded again, throat impossibly tight with suppressed emotion and unshed tears. "Then what the hell are you doing here with me?" She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, but she wasn't cruel or vindictive, wasn't anything but painfully honest. "End this, Noah. Marry me because you actually want to spend your life with me, because you actually love me, or don't. But stop using me as an excuse to avoid facing what you really want deep down in your heart." She left his penthouse that night with her dignity intact and her head held high. By morning, she'd called off the engagement herself, told both families the wedding was cancelled, released him from promises he'd never deserved to make in the first place. Noah's mother called within an hour, screaming about embarrassment and broken contracts and business arrangements that were dissolving because of his selfishness. Noah hung up on her mid-sentence without remorse or second thought. Then he did something more drastic, more final, more terrifying than he'd ever done in his comfortable life of privilege. He quit the family company through an email sent at midnight to the entire board of directors, moved out of the penthouse his mother had co-signed for, taking only what fit in his car, cut up credit cards connected to family accounts with satisfaction, closed joint investments that had been growing for years, separated himself from the entire Henry Empire with surgical precision that would make recovery or reconciliation impossible. Within 72 hours, Noah had nothing but a modest savings account that would last maybe a year, if he was careful, and a rented studio apartment in a neighborhood his mother would call unfortunate and dangerous. The place smelled like old carpet and had water stains on the ceiling that probably indicated mold, and it was the first place he'd ever lived that his mother's money hadn't touched in any way whatsoever. He showed up at Vanetta's bakery at 5 in the morning, 3 days after leaving everything behind. She was surprised to see him through the glass door, surprised enough to unlock it when he knocked persistently. What are you doing here this early in the morning? I left everything, my company, my mother, my home, my entire life as I knew it. Gabrielle ended our engagement. I have nothing now except a car and some savings. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a second chance. I'm just telling you the facts. I'm here, in Miami, and I'm not leaving this city. Vanetta stared at him like he was speaking a language she didn't understand at all, like his words made no logical sense. What do you want from me, Noah? To know my daughter. To prove I'm not the man who gave up before when things got difficult. To show you that without my mother's money and influence, without the safety net I've always had, I'm just someone who loves you and always has. Long silence while Vanetta processed this information, while dawn broke over Miami in shades of pink and orange, while the world woke up around them to a new day. Prove it then, not with grand gestures that fade quickly, not with words that mean nothing without action. Prove you're someone who stays when staying is hard, when it hurts, when it would be easier to leave. Because Layla deserves a father who stays through difficulty. The door closed firmly. 3 weeks passed slowly, each day feeling like a year. Noah got a job in construction, the only place that would hire someone whose resume showed nothing but executive positions he'd abruptly quit. His hands blistered painfully within days. His back ached constantly from unfamiliar physical labor. He learned what real work felt like, what earning minimum wage felt like, what being nobody felt like when you'd always been somebody. Every single day, he showed up outside Layla's preschool during pickup time, not approaching, not speaking, not making contact, just existing in the parking lot where Vanetta could see him if she looked. Being there, proving he could stay when it was hard, when it hurt, when nobody was watching or caring or acknowledging his presence. Vanetta saw him from her car every single day. She never acknowledged him directly, never waved, never smiled, never gave any indication she'd noticed. But she saw him, and she didn't call the police. Didn't tell him to leave. She let him be there in silence, let him prove his presence wasn't temporary or performative. On the 21st day, something finally changed. Chapter 8. The Slow Thaw. Layla noticed Noah first. Children notice everything adults pretend not to see, everything adults have learned to ignore out of self-protection and survival instinct. She broke free from Vanetta's hand during preschool pickup and ran straight to the man who'd been standing in the parking lot for 3 weeks straight. The man her mother pretended not to see every single day, despite obviously knowing he was there watching them. "Hi, you're always here. Are you waiting for someone special?" Noah knelt carefully on the hot pavement, aware of Vanetta frozen 20 feet away, watching intently with unreadable eyes, aware this moment could end everything permanently if he made one wrong move. "Hi, Layla. Yeah, I guess I am waiting for someone." "Who?" she asked with the directness of children who hadn't learned that some questions were complicated and loaded with history and pain. Noah looked at Vanetta, who'd closed the distance between them but hadn't spoken or intervened yet. "Someone very important to me." Layla grabbed his hand with the casual trust only children possess, the kind of trust that hadn't been broken yet by the world and its cruelties. "Is it my mama? She's important. Come meet her. She makes the best cookies in the whole entire world. She won a prize for them." She dragged Noah across the parking lot to Vanetta, chattering enthusiastically about art class and a turtle she'd seen at the park that morning that was eating lettuce. The three of them stood in awkward silence after Layla's enthusiasm faded naturally. Finally, Vanetta sent her daughter to get her backpack from inside the classroom. When Layla was out of earshot, she spoke without looking at Noah directly. "You can't just show up at her school every day like this for weeks. I'm not approaching her. She came to me on her own without any prompting. You're lurking in a parking lot like some kind of stalker. I'm existing in a public space. You said prove I stay. I'm staying exactly like you demanded I prove." They stared at each other across 3 feet that felt like miles of uncrossable distance and hurt. Then Layla ran back, backpack bouncing against her small back, innocence radiating from every movement and word. "Mama, can the nice man come for cookies? Please, 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 with sugar on top. I want to show him my drawings." Vanetta looked at her daughter's hopeful face full of innocent trust, then at Noah's careful expression that revealed nothing of what he was feeling, then at the impossible situation she'd created by letting him orbit them for 3 weeks without direct intervention or resolution. One cookie, then he leaves immediately after. That first afternoon at Vanetta's apartment, Noah sat at her small kitchen table like he was made of glass, like one wrong movement or word would shatter everything fragile they were building here. Layla chattered non-stop about preschool friends whose names Noah tried desperately to remember for next time, about favorite colors and the butterfly she'd seen that morning, and why grapes were scientifically better than strawberries, in her professional opinion as a 3-year-old. Noah listened like she was reciting scripture from ancient texts, learning his daughter through details she thought were small but were everything to a father who'd missed her entire life up to this point, who'd missed her birth and first words and first steps. When she asked what his favorite color was, Noah had to think hard about it, really consider the question. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked him something that simple, that human, that real instead of surface-level politeness or business-related inquiries. Blue, like the ocean on calm days when the water is perfectly clear. Mine's purple, like grapes but shinier when the sun hits them. Do you like grapes? I love grapes, actually. Then we can be friends forever and ever. The logic was perfect and inarguable in its childish simplicity. Noah's throat went tight with emotions he couldn't name or categorize or control. Vanetta watched from the kitchen counter, pretending to wash dishes that were already clean, watching Noah be gentle with their daughter in a way that made her chest hurt with something dangerous like hope creeping back in. When it was time for Noah to leave, Layla hugged him spontaneously without prompting from anyone. Noah froze completely, terrified of doing anything wrong or inappropriate, then carefully hugged back like she was made of porcelain that might shatter. Vanetta saw tears on his face he was trying desperately to hide from both of them, saw him quickly wipe them away. After the door closed behind him, Layla asked the question Vanetta had been dreading since this strange arrangement started. "Can he come back tomorrow? I like him. He's nice and he listens to me really good." Vanetta looked at her daughter, at those eyes that were Noah's eyes, staring back at her with innocent hope, at innocence that deserved protection from adult failures and complications and broken hearts. "Maybe, baby. We'll see how things go." The next Thursday, Noah showed up at exactly the time Vanetta had texted him the night before. Then the Thursday after that without fail. Then Tuesdays got added to the schedule. Then Saturdays at the park became a regular thing. Slowly, carefully, routines formed like scar tissue over wounds, covering but never quite erasing what had been damaged, what had been broken between them. Layla started calling him Noah instead of the nice man. Noah learned to braid hair from YouTube videos watched at 2 in the morning when he couldn't sleep for thinking about all the time he'd lost. Learned Layla's favorite bedtime stories by heart through repetition. Learned how to make grilled cheese the way she liked it, with the crusts cut off perfectly and the cheese melted just right, but not burned. But Noah and Vanetta barely talked alone about anything meaningful or personal. Every conversation happened with Layla present as a buffer between them. Everything filtered through the safety of their daughter's presence. Everything carefully managed to avoid the minefield of their shared past, and the hurt still raw between them. Until one night, after 8 weeks of this careful dance around each other, Layla fell asleep on the couch during a movie about princesses and dragons saving kingdoms. Noah stood to leave like always, like routine and their unspoken agreement demanded. Vanetta stopped him with a single word. "Wait." They sat at her kitchen table, the same table where everything had almost ended permanently, the same table where accusations had been thrown like grenades designed to wound. Now they sat in uncertain silence, neither sure how to begin conversations that had been delayed for 4 years, that carried the weight of everything unsaid. "I need to know something." Vonetta said finally, her voice careful and measured. If we do this, if I let you be her father completely, let you into our lives without restrictions or walls, what happens when your mother comes back inevitably? Because she will. Women like Isabella don't accept defeat gracefully. They regroup and attack from different angles. Noah's answer was immediate, certain, without hesitation or doubt. Then we fight her together as a team, as partners. Vonetta shook her head slowly, something like fear crossing her face for the first time. You don't understand what I'm trying to tell you. I can't fight her on equal ground. I don't have money for lawyers who can match hers. I don't have connections in high places who owe me favors. I don't have anything but this bakery and my daughter. If she decides she wants to take Layla from me legally or destroy my business and my reputation again for sport. Her voice broke completely. Noah reached across the table, stopping just before touching her hand, waiting for permission that didn't come, but didn't quite refuse either. If she touches you or Layla in any way, I'll burn down everything she's ever built with my own hands. I'll testify against her in court. I'll expose every illegal thing she did to you. You'd destroy your own mother for us? Really? She's not my mother anymore after what she did to you. The words were steel and conviction. You and Layla are my family now. That's it. That's everything that matters to me. Vonetta's eyes filled with tears, the first Noah had seen from her since this all started, the first crack in armor that had protected her through impossible circumstances and suffering he couldn't begin to imagine. I'm so scared, Noah. I'm so scared of believing you this time, of letting Layla believe you, of this being temporary like everything else in my life. Then don't believe me yet if you can't. Watch me. Test me as hard as you want. Break me if you need to feel safe. I'm not going anywhere ever again. They sat like that, hands almost touching across old wood that had seen so many meals, a sleeping child breathing peacefully in the next room. Then Vonetta asked the question that had haunted her for months now. Do you still love me, or is this just guilt driving you? Chapter 9. The Earning. Noah's answer was immediate. Certain, devastating in its raw honesty, without filters or self-protection or attempts to hide what he felt. I love you. I loved you 4 years ago when I thought I'd lost you forever. I love you now. I'll love you when we're old and grey and Layla has children of her own to raise. I'll love you when you hate me for my failures. I'll love you when this is hard and complicated. I'll love you when it's easy and simple. I never stopped, Vonetta, not even when I thought you were dead and buried and gone forever. Vonetta stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor, the sound harsh in the quiet apartment. You need to leave right now, immediately. Noah stood, confused and terrified he'd said something wrong again. Did I say something? You need to leave right now, because if you stay here one more minute, I'm going to kiss you. And if I kiss you, I'm going to fall apart completely, and I can't afford to fall apart. Not yet. Not until I'm absolutely sure this isn't temporary or based on guilt. Noah walked to the door, every step feeling heavy and wrong. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. When will you be sure enough? Vonetta's answer came through tears she was trying to hide from him, trying to stay strong. I don't know, honestly. Maybe never. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe when you've been here for her next birthday consistently, or the one after that, or when she starts kindergarten and you're still showing up. Maybe when I wake up one day and realize you've been showing up for so long without fail that I can't remember what it was like before you were here in our lives. Noah nodded with understanding. I'll be here for all of it, every birthday, every milestone, every single day you need to test me and my commitment. He left. Vonetta slid down the wall, crying for the first time in 4 years, letting herself feel hope that was more terrifying than despair had ever been, because hope could be taken away. Her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Thank you for letting me love her. And you. Even if you never let me closer than this distance we have now. But Vonetta wasn't ready. Not yet. The fear was too strong. 4 more months passed slowly. each week building on the last. Noah was there for Layla's 4th birthday party at a park, helping blow up balloons and serve cake, being introduced to preschool parents as Vanetta's friend who was helping out. He was there when Layla got sick with flu, bringing soup and medicine and reading stories in funny voices while fever burned through her small body. He was there for every Tuesday and Thursday dinner without fail, for Saturday morning pancakes that became a ritual, for Sunday afternoon park visits where Layla fed ducks. He never missed once, never cancelled with excuses, never failed to show up exactly when expected. He fixed Vanetta's car when it broke down, spending hours on YouTube learning how to change brake pads instead of just paying someone with money he didn't have anymore. He helped paint when her bakery expanded to a 2nd location, showing up in clothes that could get ruined, working alongside her employees until his shoulders ached. He existed in their orbit, steadily, constantly, never demanding more than they gave willingly. Vanetta watched him carefully, looking for cracks, for signs he'd leave, for evidence this was temporary. She found none. She tested him in small ways, cancelling plans last minute to see if he'd get angry. He just asked when she wanted to reschedule. She watched how he was with Layla when he thought no one was looking, saw genuine love there. December arrived. Exactly 1 year since Noah had walked into Sweet Rises and seen a ghost. Vanetta texted him late one evening after Layla was asleep. "Can you come over tonight? After she's asleep. We need to talk." Noah arrived at 8:30, nervous about what this meant, what she wanted to say. Vanetta opened the door wearing a dress he remembered from 4 years ago, simple and dark green and devastating on her figure. She'd been crying. He could tell immediately from her eyes. "What's wrong? Is Layla okay?" Vanetta pulled him inside, closed the door with finality. "Nothing's wrong, everything's right. That's what's terrifying me completely." She walked to the couch, sat, pulled him down beside her with gentle pressure. Her hands were shaking visibly, trembling. "I've spent 11 months waiting for you to leave, waiting for you to get bored or tired or for some emergency to pull you away back to your old life, waiting for this to end the way everything ends in my experience. It's not going to end. I know." She cut him off. "That's what terrifies me, because I'm out of excuses to protect myself. I'm out of walls to hide behind. I'm out of reasons to keep you at a distance." Her hand found his face, trembling against his skin. "I love you. I never stopped loving you, even when I hated you for giving up, even when I wished you were really dead so I could stop hoping you'd somehow find me. Even then, I loved you." Noah couldn't breathe properly. "Vanetta." But she wasn't finished. "But I'm still scared. So scared that this is temporary, that you'll wake up one day and realize this life isn't enough, that we're not enough." "You're everything," Noah said simply. Vanetta's eyes searched his face for lies and found none. Slowly, carefully, she leaned forward. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, testing, then deeper as 4 years of suppressed longing poured out. They broke apart, foreheads touching. Vanetta was crying. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "Then be scared with me here holding you. Be scared while I prove every single day that I'm not leaving. Be scared, but let me love you through it." Layla called out from her room, having woken up. "Mama? I had a bad dream." Vanetta pulled back. "I should—" "Go," Noah said. "I'll wait." He did wait. He waited while Vanetta comforted their daughter, read her another story, got her back to sleep. When she returned to the living room, Noah was still there, sitting on the couch, waiting patiently. "You're still here," she said softly. "I'll always be here." This time, when she kissed him, it was with less fear. They moved slowly, carefully to her bedroom. What happened there was tender and healing. 4 years of grief and love and loss poured into touch and whispered words. Afterward, tangled together, Noah whispered, "Marry me." Vanetta laughed through tears. "You can't ask me that now." "Why not?" "Because I can't think straight." Noah smiled. "Good. Then you can't overthink it. Marry me. Noah, not tomorrow, whenever you're ready. But I need you to know I want forever. Vanetta was quiet. Then, ask me in a year. If you're still here, still showing up every day, ask me in a year. Deal. Chapter 10. Earned. 1 year later, December arrived again with familiar warmth and humidity. Noah stood in their shared apartment now, making breakfast, while Layla supervised from her chair at the kitchen table. She'd turned 5 a few months ago, grown noticeably taller, started kindergarten with excitement and nervousness. "Daddy, you're doing it wrong. The eggs are getting brown on the edges." Noah grinned at his daughter, at the miracle of being called Daddy. "Show me the right way then, boss." Layla hopped down from her chair and demonstrated with exaggerated seriousness, tongue sticking out in concentration, just like her mother when she was focused. Vanetta watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, heart steady in a way it hadn't been for years. Noah had moved in 6 months ago, gradually, one drawer at a time, until his presence felt as natural as breathing. Later that morning, after dropping Layla at kindergarten and watching her run in excitedly to see her friends, they returned home alone together. Noah was washing dishes when Vanetta wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her face against his back. "It's been a year," she said softly against his shirt. Noah turned in her arms, confused for a moment. "A year since what?" "Since you asked me to marry you. Said to ask you in a year if you still wanted forever." Noah dried his hands slowly, realization dawning. "No, I said I'd ask you." Vanetta pulled out a ring from her pocket. Simple silver, not expensive, but meaningful. "Noah Henry, will you marry me?" Noah stared at the ring, at her face, at this impossible moment. Then he laughed with pure joy. Then he cried. Then he pulled her close. "You're supposed to wait for me to ask you. You've been waiting for me for 5 years total. My turn to stop wasting time and take the leap." "Yes, obviously yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed, not desperate anymore, just sure, just certain. That evening they told Layla together over dinner. She screamed with joy, knocked over her milk, ran circles around the apartment yelling about being a flower girl and wearing a princess dress, and could she have a puppy at the wedding too. After tucking her into bed later, Noah and Vanetta sat on their couch in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from real intimacy built over time. "I'm not sorry for making you wait and prove yourself," Vanetta said quietly, honestly. "I'm not sorry for staying and earning your trust back," Noah replied, lacing his fingers through hers. "I'm not sorry for testing you as hard as I did. I'm not sorry for passing every test you threw at me." They sat like that, hands linked, years of pain transforming into something stronger than it had been before. Vanetta turned to him, her eyes soft. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when I wanted you to. Even when I pushed you away." Noah kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for letting me earn you back. Some people are worth the wait, worth the work, worth everything." The next morning, Layla ran into their bedroom at dawn, jumping on the bed with chaotic energy, chattering about wedding plans with the absolute certainty of children who believed happiness was permanent and love lasted forever. Noah caught Vanetta's eye over their daughter's head, and in that look was everything they'd survived and built together. Gratitude, love, wonder at having survived the fire and found each other again. 2 months later, they married in a small ceremony at the beach, just family and close friends. Layla stood between them as they exchanged vows, holding both their hands, exactly where she belonged. Some love stories don't have fairy tale endings that come easily. They have better ones. They have real ones, where forever isn't a promise made once in passion, but a choice made daily through action. Where trust isn't given freely, but earned slowly, carefully, with years of showing up when it's hard and staying when it would be easier to leave. Where 2 people who were systematically destroyed find each other in the wreckage and build something new from the ashes. Not perfect, not easy, not without scars, but real and strong and worth every moment of pain it took to get there. And real is always better than fantasy.